ericwickstrom.substack.com. The Triumph of Technocracy Part 2, The Ultimate Deception. Eric Wickstrom. 24 to 30 minutes. In Part 1, we examined how Trump, Elon, and the tech elite are orchestrating a transformation of society through strategic chaos, weaponized AI, and the dismantling of democratic institutions. The most crucial question isn't just how this transformation is being implemented, but why it had to be engineered in a very specific way. Why did the plan require the appearance of total system failure? Why was it necessary to expose real corruption? Most importantly, why did the entire operation need to appeal specifically to those most likely to resist authoritarian control? What we're about to explore might seem counterintuitive at first. After all, if you're implementing a system of total control, wouldn't you want to crush resistance? Silence dissent? Instead, we've witnessed the opposite, a strategy that deliberately awakens resistance, confirms suspicions, and appears to validate every conspiracy theory. The truth about the pandemic, more accurately described as the plandemic, goes far beyond the usual narratives of totalitarian control or even depopulation. It served as something far more sophisticated, the most extensive psychological profiling operation in human history. Every lockdown, every mandate, every restriction was designed not just for control, but to identify, study, and ultimately co-opt those who would resist control. Think about it. The compliant majority already demonstrated during COVID that they would follow almost any directive, accept any explanation, adapt to any new normal. They were never the problem. The critical threat to any system of control has always been the minority who question, who resist, who fight back. But here's where the brilliance of the strategy reveals itself. You can't simply eliminate resistance, that only creates martyrs and strengthens opposition. You can't silence truth, that only validates suspicion. Instead, you have to make the resistance itself champion your agenda while believing they're fighting against it. What follows is an analysis of how this perfect deception was engineered, why it had to target specific demographics, and how the pandemic served as the ultimate sorting mechanism for what was to come. Most disturbingly, we'll examine why the exposure of corruption wasn't a sign of the system's weakness, but a carefully crafted component of the plan. The window for understanding this deception is rapidly closing. Once you see the pattern, you realize that even this recognition might be part of their calculation. After all, in a game of deception, even the revelation of the deception can serve the ultimate agenda. Most chilling of all is what the evidence suggests about the endgame, and the true purpose of the global vaccination campaign. If the pattern of three-dimensional chess we've observed holds true, then what appeared as a choice between compliance and resistance might have been setting up something far more sinister. The ultimate move in this game could make everything we think we know about who won and who lost the pandemic completely irrelevant. To understand what's unfolding, we must first grasp a fundamental truth about power: you cannot control a population that won't comply. More importantly, you cannot implement a system of total control if a significant minority stands ready to resist it. The pandemic revealed a crucial divide in the global population. The majority demonstrated remarkable compliance, accepting lockdowns, following shifting guidelines, adapting to new restrictions with minimal resistance. This group proved they could be led to accept virtually any changes to their daily lives if presented through the right channels with the right justifications. But a minority emerged who questioned everything. Who demanded evidence? Who rejected official narratives? Who proved willing to lose jobs, face social ostracism, and accept significant personal costs rather than comply with mandates they believed wrong? This second group presented a unique problem. They couldn't be bought off. They'd already proven willing to suffer financial consequences. They couldn't be shamed into compliance. They wore their resistance as a badge of honor. They couldn't be convinced by mainstream authorities. They'd learned to distrust official sources. Most importantly, they were precisely the demographic any resistance would need: independent thinkers, action-oriented, willing to sacrifice for principles, capable of organizing and fighting back. Traditional power structures might try to crush such resistance through force. But the tech elite's agenda required something else. Their vision of AI-driven corporate governance couldn't be implemented through brute force. It needed to appear as progress, as liberation, as the fulfillment of revolutionary ideals. This created a strategic necessity. The very people most likely to resist authoritarian control had to become the champions of its implementation. The fighters had to be convinced they were fighting for freedom while building their own cage. The resistance demographic shared key characteristics that made them both dangerous and perfect for co-option. Strong bias toward action and confrontation. Deep distrust of traditional authority. Attraction to masculine ideals of strength and independence. Willingness to consider alternative explanations. Strong sense of mission and purpose. These same traits that made them resist control could make them passionate advocates for the right cause. If their energy could be channeled, their very resistance weaponized, they would become the perfect force for implementing change. This required a multi-layered strategy. Validate their suspicions about system corruption. Confirm their worst fears about elite manipulation. Provide apparent victories and exposures. Present an alternative path that seems to oppose the system. Channel their fighting spirit toward solving the problem. Each revelation about corruption, each exposed conspiracy, each apparent victory had to feel earned, like the resistance was winning, like their efforts were paying off, like the truth was finally coming to light. This strategy created a perfect irony. The more the resistance believed they were fighting the system, the more effectively they worked to implement its true agenda. Every victory against the apparent system brought the real system closer to its goal. The genius lay in making resistance itself part of the plan. Instead of fighting an external enemy, the fighters were enlisted to tear down the very safeguards that could have protected against what's coming. To understand how this was accomplished, we must examine the pandemic's true purpose as the ultimate profiling operation. The pandemic pushed the global population to its limits, but more importantly, it revealed who would push back. Each escalating restriction, each contradictory guideline, each shifting narrative served as a probe, testing reactions, measuring responses, gathering data. The vaccine mandate became the ultimate sorting mechanism, a clear, binary choice that would definitively identify the non-compliant population. The public focus stayed on masks, lockdowns, and mandates. Meanwhile, the world's most advanced AI systems analyzed every aspect of resistance. They tracked who questioned the narrative, how they organized, what convinced them, what failed to convince them. They studied where resistors got their information and how they shared it. Most critically, they mapped what motivated people to move from passive doubt to active opposition. The operation required carefully managed disorder. Some leaks were genuine, others manufactured. Some exposures revealed truth, others planted false leads. This wasn't just about identifying who would resist, it was about understanding exactly how they would investigate, what patterns they would follow in trying to uncover truth. Even the resistance to pandemic measures became part of the study. They tracked which alternative narratives gained traction, what kind of leaders emerged, how information spread through resistance networks. Each protest, each online group, each alternative information channel added to their understanding of how opposition forms and spreads. This wasn't simple data collection. The operation probed deeper questions: what makes resistant populations lose critical thinking? What blinds them to manipulation? What triggers their emotions? What earns their trust? What inspires them to action? Every social media post, every protest, every act of defiance fed data into systems designed to build the perfect psychological profile of the resistance demographic. They tracked language patterns, emotional triggers, social networks, and decision-making processes. The AI systems didn't just gather data, they built predictive models of resistance psychology. They admitted some of this openly, and what they admit openly is always only the tip of the iceberg. So what this did was to create an unprecedented understanding of how resistance movements form and spread. What unifies diverse opposition groups? Which messages resonate across demographics? What causes resistance to fracture or unite? How opposition transforms into support. So by the pandemic's end, they had most likely assembled something unprecedented, a complete psychological blueprint of exactly how to flip resistance into support. They understood not just who would resist, but precisely how to transform that resistance into passionate advocacy for the right cause. The next phase would demonstrate just how valuable this knowledge would prove. To understand its implementation, we must examine how they engineered the perfect bait. With comprehensive psychological profiles of the resistance demographic in hand, the tech elite could now design the perfect narrative, one that would transform their greatest opponents into unwitting allies. Their AI-driven analysis provided a complete map of the resistance psyche, allowing them to craft a message so perfectly calibrated it would be almost impossible to resist. The data gathered during the pandemic revealed exactly what would resonate with their target demographic. At its core was a return to traditional masculinity, a celebration of warrior archetypes, strength, and independence that directly opposed the perceived weakness of modern society. This wasn't just about appealing to macho culture, it spoke to deeper yearnings for meaning, purpose, and traditional virtues in an increasingly chaotic world. This masculine appeal merged seamlessly with anti-establishment positioning. Every attack on mainstream media, every exposure of institutional corruption, every promise to drain the swamp resonated with a demographic that had long suspected they were being lied to. They didn't just validate these suspicions, they directed the resulting anger toward specific targets. Here we see again their multiple steps ahead thinking. They understood that their target audience couldn't be fooled with pure deception, they were too skeptical, too practiced at spotting lies. Instead, they needed to weaponize truth itself. Real corruption was exposed. Genuine conspiracies from the past came to light. Authentic compromising information emerged. Historical theories proved true. Each revelation was calibrated not just in content but in timing and context. It wasn't just about what truths would be revealed, but how those revelations would guide future understanding. Each exposure of corruption served multiple purposes, building credibility with skeptics, validating resistance suspicions, creating trust in specific channels, and, most importantly, establishing preferred narratives about what should be done about it. Making the resistance feel like they were winning became crucial. As institutional credibility crumbled and traditional power structures appeared to fail, the resistance celebrated what seemed like the fulfillment of their predictions. Alternative systems gained momentum. The old order appeared to be falling. But each victory against the apparent system has only brought their true agenda closer to fruition. The resistance is celebrating the dismantling of protective institutions while they are preparing their replacement with something far worse. The powers behind this understand that their ultimate system of control could never be implemented directly, it would trigger immediate resistance. Instead, it must be packaged as liberation. Presented as decentralization. Marketed as anti-establishment. Sold as the path to freedom. To understand how this deception plays out in practice, we must examine the perfect storm of deception currently unfolding. The 4 years between Trump's terms weren't random chaos, they were precisely engineered to create unbearable tension. Every button of the resistance demographic was systematically pushed, every trigger activated, every fear confirmed. But to understand this manipulation, we must first dispel a fundamental myth, the political spectrum itself. The idea that all political positions can be mapped onto a simple left-right spectrum isn't a natural law, it's a social construct dating back to the French Revolution's seating arrangements. Yeah, you read that correct. Yet this artificial division has become the primary lens through which most people view all political and social issues. Like sports team loyalty, political sides are purely tribal affiliations. There's no logical reason why someone who supports lower taxes should also oppose immigration, or why someone favoring environmental protection should also support specific foreign policy positions. These clustering of beliefs aren't based on coherent philosophy, they're based on tribal identity. The notion of a political spectrum, with left and right locked in eternal opposition, serves as the perfect control mechanism. It reduces complex reality to simple tribal affiliations. It channels all dissent into one of two pre-approved narratives. Most importantly, it keeps people fighting each other instead of recognizing the deeper game being played. Both sides ultimately serve the same agenda. The apparent opposition between left and right masks their unity on fundamentals, both support endless war, both enable corporate power, both advance technological control. Their theatrical battles over social issues distract from their alignment on everything that matters to those in real power. With this understanding, we can see how the years 2021 to 2024 were designed to push the resistance demographic to its breaking point. The acceleration of woke ideology wasn't random progressive excess, it was systematic provocation. Every attack on traditional values, every denial of biological reality, every demonization of masculinity served to enrage and energize the resistance demographic identified during the pandemic. The economic manipulation through inflation and market instability confirmed every suspicion about financial corruption. The escalating censorship validated fears about totalitarian control. The weaponization of law enforcement against political opponents proved every warning about systemic abuse. Each provocation built upon the last. The more extreme the progressive agenda became, the more the resistance yearned for restoration of normalcy. The more blatant the corruption grew, the more they longed for justice. The more reality itself seemed to warp, the more they craved return to traditional truth. This wasn't just random cultural conflict, it was precision engineering of psychological conditions. They pushed the exact buttons identified in their pandemic profiling: threats to masculinity, corruption of children, destruction of truth itself. Every outrage confirmed the resistance's worst fears while stoking their hopes for redemption. Now we see the payoff of this engineered tension. As exposure of corruption accelerates and justice seems within reach, the resistance feels vindicated. Their patience through persecution appears rewarded. Their predictions of systemic corruption prove true. Victory seems not just possible but inevitable. But this apparent triumph masks a deeper deception. The exposure of corruption, the promises of justice, the hope of return to normalcy, all of it channels the resistance's energy in precisely the direction intended. Their very victory ensures the implementation of what they think they are fighting. The true division isn't between left and right, but between those who understand this manipulation and those still trapped in its framework. The political spectrum serves as the perfect cage, keeping people fighting manufactured battles while the real transformation proceeds unnoticed. We see this clearly in how both sides are being played. The left embraces corporate control through fear of fascism. The right embraces corporate control through fear of communism. Both sides fight desperately while serving the same agenda. Each views the other as the ultimate threat, missing their unity in subjugation. This engineered escalation serves another crucial purpose: it creates the perfect conditions for what comes next. The resistance demographic hasn't just been antagonized, they've been systematically prepared to embrace specific solutions. Their justified anger at the system's corruption makes them eager for alternatives that, in any other context, they would immediately recognize as dangerous. To understand just how complete this preparation has been, and what it enables, we must examine the speculative endgame that makes even this deception look straightforward. Bear with me for a moment. What I'm about to propose is going to sound absolutely insane. It's the kind of revelation that makes everything we've discussed so far look like child's play. I desperately hope I'm wrong about this, that my analysis of their patterns has led me to imagine something they haven't actually planned. But if I'm right, if this is really where it's heading. What I'm about to share arose from a chilling thought: what if we're all still thinking too small? What if even those who see the manipulation, who understand the deception, who grasp how the resistance is being used, what if we're still missing the ultimate move? Think about the sequence we've witnessed. First, years of preparation building toward technological control. Then the infamous plandemic, which most still haven't fully grasped. Everyone's asking, was it about totalitarian control? Depopulation? The Great Reset? We're still debating what actually happened with the vaccine. Was it just a rushed, poorly tested product driven by corporate greed? How many were really injured by it? How many died and are still dying? Are the increasing reports of heart issues, sudden deaths, and other unexplained conditions connected to it? The questions keep multiplying while clear answers remain elusive. Even now, years later, we're still trying to understand what its true purpose was. The only thing most of us do know for sure, is that none of us regret not taking it. But what if all these theories, even the darkest ones, are still not seeing the full picture? What if the pandemic's true purpose, beyond the psychological profiling, beyond the sorting of who would resist, was setting up something far more sinister? Put yourself in their position for a moment. You've successfully identified exactly who will resist your agenda. Mapped their psychology in precise detail. Guided them to tear down the old system. Made them feel like they're winning. Used them to pave the way for your new order. But here's where it gets truly diabolical. What happens when these fighters, these skeptics, these natural resistors have served their purpose? When they've unknowingly helped implement everything you wanted while thinking they were fighting against it? They become your biggest liability. This is where I had a thought so dark it kept me awake at night. What if the vaccine isn't what anyone thinks it is? What if it's not a bioweapon for depopulation? What if it's not a tracking device or control mechanism? Or at least not just that. What if it's actually a, somewhat, working vaccine, but against something that hasn't been released yet? Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine, after the resistance has completed their unwitting role, after they've helped establish the new order while believing they were fighting it, then comes the real pandemic. Not another coronavirus variant. Something engineered for maximum lethality. Something that leaves no time for people to try to figure out what to do about it. The previously vaccinated population, the proven compliant, would survive. At least some of them. The unvaccinated resistance, having served their purpose, would be eliminated in one fell swoop. The strategic perfection is chilling. The strongest opposition to the new order, eliminated. The official narrative about vaccine safety, validated. The surviving population, grateful and proven compliant. The demographic most likely to resist future control, gone. If I'm right, and God, I hope I'm not, we're looking at the most intricate and satanic plot in human history. Get your resistance to do your revolution for you, and then wipe each and every one of them off the map once they've served their purpose. This isn't just speculation based on paranoia. Look at how they operate, multiple layers of deception. Using opposition to serve their ends. Making truth appear as lies and lies as truth. They invert everything. Three-dimensional chess where every move serves multiple purposes. The actual implementation might differ. Maybe the vaccine's true purpose is something else entirely. But understanding how these people think, how they turn every piece of resistance into a tool for control, is crucial for seeing through whatever comes next. We still have a narrow window to recognize this pattern, to step outside their engineered responses, to find genuine ways to resist that don't play into their hands. But that window is closing fast. And the stakes might even be far higher than most realize. The future being built right now may determine who survives to see it. The time to fuck around and find out is over. If you've followed this analysis, you understand we're facing something unprecedented in human history. The sophistication, yes I love this word, of the deception, the depth of the manipulation, the scale of what's being implemented, we need to act, and we need to act now. Let me be crystal fucking clear. There is no room for, maybe Trump's a good guy, or, maybe if person X comes into office. That kind of thinking isn't just naive anymore, it's dangerous. If you're still holding on to any hope that some political savior will rescue us, you're a liability to genuine resistance. Almost the entire alternative media space has been compromised, at least the new mainstream alternative media. The voices that seems to be exposing the truth are obviously just pure shills, controlled opposition, steering resistance in pre-approved directions. How quickly some I held in high regard turned into clapping seals at the very thing they claim to be fighting. Almost no one is asking critical questions anymore. Are they genuinely fooled or have they been playing the part all along? Not sure what is worse. There are only a precious few genuine voices left with large audiences still trying to expose this scam. We are few, and because we are few, we need to be incredibly fucking discerning. We need people who can stand firm on unstable ground, navigate rapidly changing situations, and question everything, including their own beliefs. People who trust nothing from the top down and aren't afraid to stand alone for truth when necessary. Not followers, not group thinkers, but individuals strong enough to stand firm against the tide of bullshit while remaining humble enough to adapt when new truth emerges, even if you're the last man standing. The dissident voices are always the last thing between now and tyranny. We need to organize, but we need to be extremely selective about who we organize with. Any sign of bias is a liability. Any inability to process new information is a threat. Any tendency toward hero worship is a danger we cannot afford. This isn't just about external action. We need to get our own shit together fast. Kill your inner bitch once and for all. Drop the self-destructive habits, we don't have time for that shit anymore. Get physically and mentally stronger. Most importantly, develop your intuition and learn to trust it. In a world of almost perfect deception, our divine connection to truth becomes our strongest weapon. Yeah, this all sounds fucking crazy. Trust me, I know. I'm not sure exactly how we'll do this, especially if that endgame speculation proves true. That's the ultimate coin toss right there. But here's the thing, we are divine beings. expressions of the infinite consciousness that ultimately governs everything. So while I'm clear about the danger, I'm not worried about the outcome. This is the culmination of the most epic drama ever played out on the human stage. We will win, but holy shit, it's going to be a nail-biter. We'll have to push ourselves beyond every limit we thought we had. Rise above every weakness. Transcend every limitation. The time for gradual awakening is over. The window for action is closing fast. This is the end game. The choices we make right now, the actions we take, the strength we show, it all matters more than we can imagine. We can do this. We must do this. The alternative isn't acceptable. The question is, are you ready to level up? To stand firm regardless of the cost? To trust your inner knowing even when you stand alone? Because that's what it's going to take. Be brave. Be courageous. Be loving. Be kind. Be unfuckwithable. Be annoying. Be happy. They hate that. It's the antidote. And it's infectious. No more fucking around. The time is now. What do you think? Am I crazy here?